stood in the sun. No, obviously.
Hello. My name is Riina Rammo. I am an archaeologist and working at the University of Tartu. And at the moment, I am participating in a very exciting project. We are studying textile dyes. And now, today, we will have, I hope, very exciting discussion about how past textile dyes can inform the future. And now we are here in the Estonian National Museum in a very cozy and nice place. And now I will give the word to Riikka Räisänen.
Thank you, and thank you, Riina, and the Estonian National Museum for inviting us this Colour4CRAFTS consortia to spend our consortia meeting here in the museum in this wonderful place. So my name is Riikka Räisänen. I come from the University of Helsinki, Finland, and I'm leading this Colour4CRAFTS research project, which aims to look the traditional craft practices, also current practices, and then how we can engage the knowledge and bring forward to the future's coloration technologies and innovations. So we are, our time frame goes back to 1st century till the future's 2015. We are building futures visions for textiles coloration particularly. And today we present here some of the results and ideas what we have developed in the project so far. We are now about in a halfway through this project. It started in July 2023 and it will end at the end of 2026. So this is really a nice place to kind of check what we have done and where we want to head on. And in this Colour4CRAFTS consortia, there are presenters from Finland, from University of Finland, Helsinki and University of Lapland. Then we have Estonia, Riina's group from the University of Tartu. And then we have Belgium, a Heritage Institute, KIK IRPA, taking part of the consortia. From Britain, University of Leeds. And then from France, we have the company Pili, who is producing dyes with microtechnology means. So, and also today we have presenters, we have the advisory board for this consortia, and we have our advisory board member Paul Hamilton today in the discussion, and he will then later explain her presentation. Okay, and for the audience, so those who are online, you are welcome to expose your questions through the chat tool that is available in YouTube. So please use that. This program goes so that we first have short presentations of these persons, so Liis Luhamaa, Tanel Verne, Paul Hamilton and Chris Carr, and after that we will have discussion, and then the audience is free to ask questions as well. And of course audience on place can then just raise up the hand, and you will get the mic to ask the questions. Okay, but let's go to our program. So as we have this vast scope in the research consortia, we go with the textiles with the title How Does the Past Inform the Future? And we start with Liis Luhamaa. Liis is a researcher of Estonian historical textile dyes and dyeing technologies. She has 20 years of hand-on experience in dyeing and natural dyes, and she's a textile specialist at the Institute of History and Archaeology of the University of Tartu, and she's part of the researchers in this Colour4CRAFTS project. So please, Liis, floor is yours.
Thank you, Riikka. You already said several things I had written down to introduce myself. So yes, I'm researching historical Estonian textiles, textile dyes, and dyeing technologies. And although I first received my education at the University of Tartu in biology and environmental technology, I have been working with textile crafts as a handicrafter, as a workshop teacher, also as a production dyer and spinner for almost 20 years. And I'm mostly self-taught, so I don't have education of chemistry, and as a result of my work until now, my research is strongly practice-based, leans on practice-based method. And in 2017, I started making and researching Estonian folk costumes. And this inspired me to go to university again. And I did my second master's degree in heritage technology in Viljandi Culture Academy about West Estonian double-cut woolen skirts. And now I'm also actively taking part of the work that is done by the umbrella organization in the field of national costumes in Estonia, MTÜ Rahvarõivas, and I'm also on the board of the Estonian Folkcraft and Art Union. And currently, I am working as a textile specialist at the Department of Archaeology in Tartu University, and I'm very happy to be part of the international Colour4CRAFTS team. And my main tasks in this project are to search and compile information from Estonian archives about dyes and dyeing techniques that's been used in Estonia historically, and to do dye experiments based on this information. So to this topic we have today. When I say supercritical carbon dioxide dyeing or metabolic engineering of microorganisms, it's clear to everyone that it involves a lot of complicated research, which is carried out by our project's chemists, and the same understanding of complexity comes easy when we look at the historic catalogs of color samples left over from professional master dyers. There are so many different shades which they could dye to order, so their dyeing techniques must have been really complicated. But when historical dyeing that took place in rural settings, in farms, was done by local peasant women, is the subject, often only the color source is mentioned. For example, saying that the yarns in the farm were dyed with alderbark or birch leaves. And these are very simple plants and very familiar plants that anyone could go and collect from the forest or meadow close to their home. And the dyeing techniques are rarely discussed. And if you only mention the plants, the local plants, when talking about traditional rural dyeing, it does seem a very simple matter, because any of us can go and collect some plants, alder bark or birch leaves. So the dyeing sometimes, it actually was very simple. But in many cases, as soon as you start to examine and reconstruct the old recipes in more detail, the complexity, intricacy, and knowledge associated with these dyes and dyeing methods becomes apparent. And I will now give you one example of such a dye. One of the success stories of our project, thanks to the old recipes that I found in Estonian archives. Alder red, alder bark red, lepakoore punane, or lepakoore karva in Estonian, is a color word familiar both to Estonians and our neighbors. And it did not necessarily always mean the shade of yarns dyed with alder bark, because when you peel an alder, both the inner side of the bark and the wood that was under the bark very quickly turn a beautiful reddish-brown color. And the name of ladybug in Estonian is lepadriinu. You could translate it as alderbug. And it refers to the color of the ladybug's wings that resembles the color of the alderbark. However, there are also mentions in the archives about dyeing yarn red with alderbark. And many dyers, including my colleague Kristarik and me, and we've tried to dye yarn red with alder bark. But we were not successful, despite having read many books and done many dyeing, having thermometers and pH meters, the whole deal. And it was quite frustrating because, as you can see, the dye bath from alder bark is a beautiful red color. But the yarns did not dye red from this bath. We only got yellow or green, and with iron mordant, also brown and black. And we did try many different methods that we know of, boiling at different temperatures, using fermentation, using wood ash lye, dyeing mordanted and unmordanted yarns. So, quote-unquote breakthrough came last year when I found 3 recipes for dyeing alderbark red or alderbark tan, as it was called, lepabark, in the slip archive of the Institute of the Estonian Language. And these recipes were collected from Kodavere in eastern Estonia. And although there are differences in the methods described in the recipes, for example, the bark could either be boiled or soaked in hot water. You could use water or wood ash lye. And there were some specific things common through all the 3 recipes. Firstly, freshly collected raw alder bark was used. And more importantly, the dyeing had to be done on a sunny day. It was stressed a lot. And the dyeing method itself was also different. So the yarn was not kept in the bath through the whole dyeing, but it was dipped in and lifted out to dry in the sun for many times during 2 days. The dyeing took place. And only after finding these archival descriptions were we finally able to dye alder bark red on a textile. So there are both woolen and linen yarns it worked on. And the shade of the Aldebaran red is a warm brownish red. And I really love the comment given by the person who described the dyeing for the institute, that it is not yellow, it is not red, it's like the color of the fox. And in Estonian, it's ei ole kollane, ei ole punane, niisugune rebane on. So you see that in the case of dyeing Aldebaran red, there were quite many specifics. The dyer had to know when to collect the bark, in what condition to use the bark, what the weather should be like when you wanted to dye, which liquid to use for making the dye bath, what temperature to keep it, and they also had to know the technique of dyeing, of dipping in and taking the yarn out to dry in the sun. And they also had to know which parts of the recipe they could change and which had to stay the same so that you were successful in dyeing. So in summary, dyeing with plants has always been complex, even if it was done in a rural setting by local plants, by peasant women. And as soon as you start to research and focus, this complexity becomes apparent. It is, of course, not as complicated as the supercritical CO2 dyeing, but plenty of knowledge and experience was needed for these traditional dyeings as well. Moreover, the historical sources show us that the notion that dyeing with plants required more skill than dyeing with synthetic dyes was also recognized in the past during the time when synthetic dyes just came to market. One of my favorite early advertisements for aniline dyes appeared in an Estonian newspaper in 1865, and it says, "Merchant Böckner's shop sells dyes," and they were specifically French aniline dyes, with which every inexperienced person who has never dyed before can dye yarn in beautiful and lasting colors. In Estonian, Böckneri poodis on kõiksugu värvisid müüa, kellega iga oskamatu käsi, kes iial pole värvinud, võib ilust ehtlõnga värvida. And also in 1872, the same newspaper published a story. It was in the form of a fictitious interview with an old and poor farmer, and he complained about the arrival of the new aniline dyes. And mentioned that in the past, so before that, his wife could earn good money by dyeing the village's wool blue, pot blue, using the indigo urine vat. And he stressed that it took an intelligent woman to know how to dye blue yarn in the right way. But now, with the new dyes, anyone can do it. And I have to tell you that the meaning of the Estonian word for intelligent that he used, mõistlik, nowadays also mostly means sensible. So to answer the question we posed for this discussion, what can we learn from the past, could be one of the answers, like this old Estonian woman who knew how to dye pot blue. We also have to be intelligent and sensible.
Thank you, Liis. Very, very interesting. And of course, as a leader of the consortia, I'm very happy that we make new breakthroughs and find recipes for old colorants, and we can study those in detail, what really happens in the chemistry point of view, why these colorants turn into this beautiful red and attached fibers. So very fascinating things have been discovered. Okay, but let's continue. The next presenter is Tanel Veenre. He obtained his master's degree from the Estonian Academy of Arts in 2005. Since 1994, he has presented his creations at more than 300 exhibitions and fashion shows around the world, like in Munich, New York, Vienna, Oslo, Copenhagen, Helsinki, etc. He has also taught at universities and given numerous workshops and lectures. Besides jewelry, art and design, Tanel's creative footprint includes fashion, design work in various fields such as wallpaper and porcelain. And his title today is Fairy Tale World on Textiles, Designer Perspective. So please, Tanel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. And sorry, I was a few minutes late. I totally forgot myself into the fantastic storage of this museum, researching folk costumes for next collections. But yeah, here today I was trying to think what I can add to this topic. That's textile dyeing, and that was very surprising for me because I never have looked my creating and my business process through this angle. So it was totally new, like very refreshing. And yeah, I'm deeply rooted in art practice. So my teacher was a witch and extremely esoterical practice rooted in alchemy and shamanism. But here I am doing also business today. So I'm really, I think, between these two worlds, trying to navigate very sensitively. But yeah, mostly I'm just going to share my very practical viewpoints towards the theme through my brand. So creating a product. And yeah, I started as a jeweler and also as a craftsperson, of course. My background is deeply crafted, always hands-on. And now I have been running the brand around 15 years. And in the Estonian scale, we are really big. And I'm so passionately and intensely involved with anything I do. So both as a gallery artist and also as a designer for my own brand. Yeah, and then, how to say, brand is a dialogue with a client. So the thing is, I have my vision and I'm very alive and very sensitive and very intuitive as an artist. But as a designer, I am with a dialogue with a client, with a women who are wearing my design. And definitely my unique voice is just very natural. I never push it, but I'm all about the pattern, color, and the story. And that today, if I look at the textile, then my focus is fully on silk. So this is something I have been really specializing last 6 years. I create mostly unique pieces. They are very, very strongly dominant. The design is very, yeah, you can recognize it easily. So it's not neutral pieces because I think world is full of very easily wearable neutral things. So I want to add my artistic voice to this world, and that's also my responsibility, I feel. And it also guarantees that there is never, I mean, each item is precious in a way. Even if I create a lot, they always find a person in the end of the day. There will never be a waste, and also I know that the pieces are are treated very specially. It's a special piece. It's a statement piece. So the kaftan dresses has become my signature. It's very. I used a lot of 3D modeling also to see the patterns and cuts on the body. And it's beautiful because it's a zero waste, but it's not like because I want to be sustainable, but it's mostly because I'm using silk and it's expensive. So even like little parts, if some cuts are like a bat cut, there is something, then we use always for our pockets, the small parts, or we do the belts, or so every bit of this is used. And this is like just like the screenshot from my desktop folder, where I was preparing a collection based off Aili Vint, Estonian one, amazing artist. So working with optical illusions, but you can see it's just like the pure fun and joy of working with a color, which is pretty unique. And also it's a very niche. It's definitely like, I mean, you wear it, I'm working with a 0.001% of the population. But I mean, that's the niche. And then just also just showing a little bit the process, like how using also the computer programs to replace the patterns, to use the fabric so full. So I mean, I'm like counting the centimeters. My files are always the length of the fabric. So it's like 427 because I pay for every centimeter. And I use digital printing. So that's the only technique that allows me to do these things. And yeah, that was just one example of this fall collection, but I use a lot of watercolor. For example, I have been now all my Christmas break watercoloring like crazy. So I want to deliver this hand touch to the digital. So I'm just playing with the water and the paint, and how it's melting and how unexpected it is. And then I'm like photographing it, and then I'm turning into the digital files, and I start to layer and play with them. So here is just something like about this technical data about digital printing, which is not my interest actually. I copied it because of the topic of the conference, more or less just to, I mean, it's important part, but not for me as a designer, if I'm honest. So this is from the Silk Bureau, which is in UK. They have really great traditions there. And in Estonia, we don't have any silk printing. A digital one. So, and then it was interesting thing, I just recently did a client survey and around 500 answers, and we had it was really profound, almost 40 questions. So I was really trying to sense how important are like sustainability, like the origin of the materials and all these kind of aspects. And yeah, I think of course, in this kind of survey, there is always a lot of wishful thinking on the filler side. So I have to definitely scale it down to get more realistic. But even like these ones that show like that people are not, how to say, in my brand case, they are not, this kind of sustainable effects are not the main selling point. It's definitely the design and the story and the unique patterns and colors. And this is something much more important for the wearer than the origin, for example, of the dye or a fabric. Yeah. So it's just like even very playful questions. Like I just shoot the same photo, like exactly identical photo. One is made in Estonia, 190 euros, or also like asking like one is like 190 euros in silk, another one is polyester and 90 euros still, even though people were preferring the silk over polyester. Very, yeah, it's pretty clear. But then again, they say like the price point is important. So it's a kind of balancing between these and trying really to understand how to get into the head of the customer. So, but we have done lots of projects that have been also a lot of failures, and I'm very hands-on, really like working every day until midnight because it's my passion. So, like also like we did like this hand-tied T-shirts, but it was like really didn't work out really. And all my jewelry studio turned into the dyeing laboratory. But it was just so much. It was so, how to say, unpredictable. So the digital printing allows me to create results that are very predictable. And that's very important when I communicate, when I sell in online store, which is becoming more and more relevant for a business. And I mean, just like, because also my ambition is always do all the fabrics full on with my print, which is very unique actually in fashion business. Everybody's using already existing fabrics. So using natural, like for example, like these cottons, I mean, it didn't work out. It was almost impossible to find a good producer because natural fabrics obviously don't, how to say, like the dyes get very easily out of the fiber during the consumption, during the washing. So it was like massive floppy for me. But I mean, I've been very much like trying, and this is like the story part now a little bit, like just to give a glimpse of this, my passion from the 5 year. Like I was drawing this always after the folk festivals, going home and like hundreds and hundreds of this most colorful things, and here I am now 40 years later. So it's kind of this transmission from my roots, making it into the cool, interesting, fairy tale-ish fashion item, translating it into the like real life experience, but also definitely the visual storytelling. And this also like these are like the examples. They're like, for example, the right like this cut. It's just like leftovers of the fabric, like using like two, like how to say, almost like 4 stripes of a fabric to make this. Yeah, always innovating in the simple cuts, but to use it very optimally. And I mean, in the end of the day, I think it should be a fun. In this, I wanna give to the viewers this kind of free-floating feeling that you can escape of the grayness and sometimes the heaviness of being. So yeah, I feel this is my mission. So that's a short intro to my textile practice.
Thank you, Tanel. Very, very inspiring, and I was very happy to see you inspired by the tradition and heritage. I'm also working with another project, Traction, where we looked at Finnish folk costumes and how could we bring new inspiration from them to current design, and it's really fascinating to see how this transfers into these beautifully designed and digitally printed textiles. Very, very nice. Okay, let's move forward. The next presenter is Paul Hamilton. He's an advisory board member of our Colour4CRAFTS project, and he has been 38 years in. He has 38 years of textile experience after joining the local mill in 1985, straight from school. So now we really have a long experience industry person here to tell us how the real world works. Initially, he was first employed as a laborer and has progressed to laboratory assistant, trainee, technical dyer, head dyer, and from technical manager to technical director. And he oversees day-to-day operations over about 25 tons of wool blends, cotton, bamboo, silk, and polyester fiber dyeing per week. So a lot of fabric has gone through his hands. He has supported numerous trainees through the Society of Dyers and Colorists training courses. And as chartered colorist, Paul Hamilton has numerous roles in organizations to support future dyers. And Paul's title today is to reflect Colour4CRAFTS from partners' perspective. So please, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that, Rika, and thank you for doing the first page of my talk and making me feel incredibly old. So I want to start at the beginning anyway. So my name's Paul Hamilton, and I'm here as a member of the advisory board. And I'm probably the person that's going to bring the room down from the hard-nosed industrial side of things, because it's all very interesting, very craft, and very exciting. I'm more interested in bulk, in sustainability, and can we actually make money at it, as well as save the planet. So as you say, I've worked at the same group for the last 38 years. And when I joined in 1985, we were dyeing 100 tonnes a week of mainly top-dyed uniforms, suiting fabrics, largely for the Middle East. We used to dye in Bradford, spin in Poland, weave in the Middle East. Over the last 30 years, I've managed to reduce that to 25 tonnes a week. So I've managed to lose 75% of the business and still have a job. So I'm doing okay. We're now commission dyers. And as you say, we dye wool, cotton, nylon, polyester, silk, bamboo, cashmere, Nomex. We basically dye whatever the customers want us to dye, which is what you've got to do to survive these days. And whilst we now rent a large portion of the site out at Bulmer and Lum, Textiles is still at our core. It's still at our heart, and it's what we want to do. It's what we want to continue doing. So considering the question of textile dyes for tomorrow, how can a practical dyeing operation exploit the sort of things being worked on? How can we commercialise opportunities like Daiku, like natural dyes? As a technical dyer, the first thing you learn to do is how to correctly apply dyes. Time, temperature, profiles, fixation levels, rinse methods. Then you spend the rest of your career learning every trick in the book to take them off again. As a commission dyer, as soon as something's too dark or the wrong tone, you've got to bring that shade down, particularly when you're dyeing cashmere, expensive wool fibres. So in my career, we've gone from acid milling dyes to chrome dyes to reactive dyes. On every occasion, the dyers have become faster, more difficult to remove. And whilst on many occasions this can be an advantage for obvious reasons, from a practical dyeing point of view, it can be a major disadvantage if the shade's too dark or the wrong tone. The one thing that strikes me is whenever we see the images of tons and tons of textiles in piles on landfill sites, washed up on shores, how brightly coloured and vivid the coloured textiles still are. Maybe the current classes of dye we use are just too good, disproportionate to the life cycle of the clothing. Could we utilise something like Daiku, something like natural dyes, to actually help this and make something that's fit for the life cycle of the product? It's just an idea of something that we've been looking at. I mean, one example from my business where we've exploited our ability to remove dyes rather than our ability to apply them is our foray into the industrial laundry sector in the UK, and we developed a business called Regenex. So with the continuing decline of the UK textile market, we've looked to other markets where we can utilise our knowledge and experience of textile treatments and processes and best make use of our large purpose-built site, loading bays, forklift trucks, effluent control, heat exchangers. Here one that we've done is our expansion into the industrial laundry sector. Here we've exploited our extensive knowledge in the removal of dyes rather than their application to create a whole new business called Regenex. 7 years ago, one of our main customers left his role at SAL Holdings and took on the role at Berenstain. So we were introduced to the world of the industrial laundry, and particularly the eye-watering amounts of textiles, and particularly the amount of waste it creates, mainly due to the early disposal and ragging of hospitality and healthcare linen. Like most people, we were blissfully unaware of the UK hospitality and healthcare sector, but became very interested very quickly. So a couple of figures just to say why we were interested in this from a sustainability angle. The industrial laundry sector in the UK is worth £1 billion annually. It employs more than 32,000 people across 3,700 businesses, and there are 134 sites actively involved in washing at the moment. The industry washes on average 50 million pieces of linen per week, a piece being a sheet, a towel, a napkin, a duvet. I'll say that again, 50 million pieces a week are going through the washing. That's in the UK alone. So the amount in Europe would be absolutely mind-blowing. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is it's a sustainability issue. Now, if we're looking at sustainability from an industry point of view, this is the sort of thing that gets our interest because we're looking at bulk. I've just got a video here just as an idea of something that we created. It's now not running. We'll just run that in the background, because that's an idea of the sort of scale that we would look for from a sustainability point of view. Now, everything on that, all the videos you see, everything there was going to landfill.
That's why
Everything was
Regenex
going to
has
be
spent the last 2
thrown away,
years trying to
discarded, or
innovate a
back to
process which will
that's the mill
give
that I run.
commercial laundries the opportunity to get a full economic life out of
So
their assets.
if we think about that,
I think the laundry industry
TSA,
as a
the
whole
Textile Services
has never looked
Association,
outside of itself.
estimate each
for
piece
someone
should
to
last
actually
around 3
process
years.
these. So Regenex
So pieces,
are
say,
new, they're the market
bedsheet,
leaders in something
pillowcase.
that's never been on.
In reality, last year, over 30 million pieces were disposed of early due to small stains, black marks, fake tan, rust, resulting in over 2,000 tonnes of linen being landfilled or chopped and used as rag. In fact, one of the most disturbing figures is that in practice, over 50% of industrial linen is disposed of within 4 months. This is huge in terms of carbon footprint, cost, replacement linen. Taking into account the fact that 80% of a textile's carbon footprint is in its manufacture and transport, with only 20% in its usage, then shortening the lifespan by such a time frame is environmental suicide. So again, where does a dyer from Bradford fit into this argument? Well, as I said earlier, as a dyer, the first thing you learn is every trick in the book to apply dyes. The second thing you learn is every trick in the book to take them off again. So we started working on a system where we could reverse engineer the stains and then re-whiten the base. Our thinking being that a stain's basically an unfixed dye, and so chemistry we've utilised in the past for dye removal could be adapted for stain removal if we utilise the correct processing conditions. We started working on a single piece, then with a single laundry, and within 12 months the Regenex system was born. Regenex take the linen which has been rejected from industrial laundries for staining, and through a process of complex scouring, dye stripping and re-bleaching, render a large proportion back as serviceable linen. We utilise a combination of classic dyeing techniques and bleaching machinery, along with established industrial laundry techniques. And through this newly developed processing route, we render over 70% of linen previously being disposed of back as serviceable linen. Depending on the cost of the replacement linen, it's generally about 40% of the cost. So I'm just trying to give an example of where sustainability actually can go, rather than just at a craft level. And of the linen which fails our process, we create premium rag products, and every kilo we process is sold on for reuse. So nothing goes to landfill at this stage. So since its advent, we've returned just over 2,000 tonnes of linen destined for early disposal back to 30 industrial laundry partners, saving many thousands of tonnes of carbon and water, which have been needed to replace the polyester and cotton. As a byproduct, we've created 12 new jobs and invoiced just over £2.5 million. So, it was a worthwhile exercise. And this is, in my opinion, true practical sustainability, extending the use of existing textiles before considering recycling or repurposing. Nothing mind-blowing in terms of technology, no great new chemistry, just a simple solution to a very large problem. Use what you have for longer. Consumption is at the core of the sustainability argument, although this can be somewhat unpalatable for those of us that make a living out of selling textiles. So returning to the question raised in the seminar, textile dyes for tomorrow, how does the past inform the future? Maybe one of the answers in the fact that in the past we didn't have the luxury of the throwaway society we exist in today, and we found ways of using what we had for longer. Historically, the industrial laundry sector built into their costing models 10% of total turnover for replacement linen, and passed this cost on to the customers. The thousands of tonnes of rejected linen were disposed of. I don't really think they cared. With the increase in awareness of sustainability, they're having to re-look at this. The hospitality customers, particularly the millennials and the younger market, are demanding to know where is it being thrown away, what are you doing it? And they're pushing them to use projects like ours to extend the life. Remember, according to the hierarchy of waste management, reuse is only second to reduce and above recycle. So Regenex found a way of maintaining the linen in the usage phase by re-bleach and re-optic. Is this something we could be adopted if we were to use dye-cu or natural dyes? Would the ability to remove the dye or change colours allow us to maintain the textiles longer and so exploit the massive carbon footprint created in the manufacture phase longer rather than the whole-scale disposal of what are serviceable textiles, which is currently the norm? So Regenex is one example where a long-standing textile organisation has made a real contribution to the sustainability question we all face. As you can imagine, as you introduced, I've had nearly 40 years in the industry, and I've seen quite a lot of changes in the industry. Initially, the big challenges were to do with energy costs. So we introduced variable speed motors, reduced liquor dyeing machines, intelligent controllers, reduced and intelligent lighting, water reuse and recycling, heat exchange systems. That got us over that hurdle for a while. The next thing that faced us was the increase in knowledge of employee welfare and working conditions. So again, we went to removal of chrome dyes, removal of carcinogenics, employee monitoring, hearing, spirometry, mental health, automatic dispensing, reduced night shift working, better welfare. So what's the next big thing for the textile industry? I strongly believe sustainability offers the next big opportunity. I don't think it's the challenge, it's an opportunity. For the past 25 years, I've known and worked with some of the cleverest and well-resourced academics in the UK, and I've marvelled at the limitless resources they seem to have at their disposal, and waited and waited and waited and waited for them to come up with the next big thing. So far, I've discovered what it's not. It's not remote colour matching with cameras and tri-stimulus values. It's not using food waste as a dye stuff. It's not using the dye-house effluent stream as a dyeing medium. It's not high or low temperature dyeing of wool. It's not using plasma for dyeing. It's not novel fibres such as nettles. I personally question the practicality of polyester recycling when it's almost exclusively from plastic bottles and represents less than 3% of polyester usage. All the above and many more were attempted, I'm sure with the best of intentions, and spent a few million quid, but they've all failed. So what do we need? Now, in industry, in my opinion, we need something new. I'm not a fan of accreditation schemes. I tick a lot of boxes for a lot of brands. Does it really make a difference? I'm not sure it does. We want something scalable. You know, I know that everything starts in a test tube, it starts in a few grams, but to get our interest, we need to sell this in tons. I think we've got away with greenwashing for long enough. I think the consumer's getting smarter, and the smoke and mirrors we've used in industry, we're not going to get away with them. Give us something different. We don't have to copy what we have. In fact, something considered a problem may actually become a selling point with clever marketing. And give us something with a story. It can be historical, it can be natural dyes with a nod to the old dyeing methods. It could be something like Daiku, that's very high tech, but just give us something we can build a narrative around. My team at Bulmer & Lum probably consists of the best package dyer I've ever worked with. He's 70-year-old and still loves what he does every day. The guy that's running the place, well, I'm not there, is my son who's 32, and unfortunately seems to have the same affliction to dyeing as I have now. I'd hate to think that by the end of my career, and even his, we're still using millions of litres of water, dumping thousands of tonnes of the same dyes, and landfilling millions of tonnes of textiles in the same way we have since I started. There's got to be an opportunity out of something like this. So my reason and interest for projects such as this, whilst I appreciate much of the research is historical, and the displays are fantastic and very interesting, but as the hard-nosed businessman on the panel, is it something we can adopt, maybe in craft scale or maybe in industrial scale? Is it the next big sustainable thing? And can we make some money at it?
Thank you, Paul, and for the very good questions and ideas. And I liked the video because now I understood a lot better what is the point that really this taking out of the color and degrading the colorant might be the next issue and next step to go forward, that we can really extend and reuse the materials better. That's a very good point. Okay, and let's move forward with our last speaker, Chris Card from the University of Leeds. He was awarded a personal chair of textile science and technology at the University of Manchester in 2004 and became deputy head of School of Materials, Textiles and Paper until 2009. In 2013, he joined the School of Design at the University of Leeds as a professor of textile technology and subsequently became head of the School of Design in September 2020. His main interests are in the modification of fiber materials in order to improve performance Also, research has focused, for example, wet chemical and biotechnological modifications of textiles, coloration, cultural heritage science, recycling and sustainability. In 2015, he was awarded the Society of Dyers and Colorists Gold Medal for contributions to textile and color education. And he has also been a president in the SDC at 2023 and 24. So thanks, Chris, for being part of our consortia, and now we are eager to hear your talk.
Thank you very much, Rika. That all sounded very impressive. In reality, I have my reality check off my daughter, who regularly tells me, you know nothing. And when you have that reinforcement, you have to work for your dinner. I'm old school. I find it very difficult to sit down and talk, particularly as you become a sitting target. So if somebody makes some barbed comments at you, you've got nowhere to go other than to squirm uncomfortably in your chair. So thank you, Paul. Tanel, those designs, fabulous, absolutely fabulous in bringing about the changes that we're looking to do with natural dyes. It's not going to be some aging academic like me that's going to change the world. It's the creativity of the designer who is going to capture the imagination of the consumer and the use of materials and produce products that you're just going to want to go, I want to buy that, I want to wear it. Yeah, wonderful. So, great to be here, great to contribute in the project, and hopefully we can change the world, and we can make natural dyes a keystone of textiles in the 21st century. My colleagues at Leeds, I'm sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Is that back? Yep. Debbie, Peter, Muriel, Pammy also, and Bintan. What are we looking to do? We're looking to aid that transition, develop sustainable materials, novel bio-based materials, and work closely with industry to try and bring about the necessary change and establish natural dyes as a key part of the industry going forward. The areas we're looking at, water is hugely important in the textile area, and the industry is identified as being a major polluter. And textile coloration, which uses a lot of water, is one of the target areas. So if we can reduce or even eliminate the use of water in textile processing, we will go a long way to reducing the impact on the environment of the textile and coloration industry. Mentioned supercritical carbon dioxide, that's one of our key areas. We're looking to build from where you can currently dye with this technology, which is polyester and cellulose acetate, and extend it into cotton and wool and the natural fibers. Polyester is a hugely important fiber. It makes up 53% of the global textile market. So that is one of the key challenges for natural dyes, is to impact and produce a range of colorants that can actually be applied to polyester and achieve exciting coloration. For cotton and wool, these are not compatible with the dyes that are used on polyester, so we have to look at modifying the fiber. Alternatively, or complementary to that approach, is look at how can we improve existing aqueous processing and modify fibers like cotton to make them more easily dyeable and catenize them. Wash fastness has been mentioned already, one of the key challenges for natural dyes. We're fortunate that the domestic laundering market and technology is evolving and becoming much more helpful to the durability of natural dyes on fibres. And lastly, another waterless coloration process, and again, trying to capture that dynamism of the creative designer, is digital printing. What is supercritical carbon dioxide? Well, essentially, it's another state of matter. You've got solid, liquid, and gas. When you pressurize the carbon dioxide gas, it becomes a supercritical fluid. These are the types of commercial machines that are available, but in producing that fluid, what we have is the ability to dissolve the dye, and essentially, we have a dye bath. The fabric goes in dry, it's dyed, you release the pressure, it comes out dry. You have no costs in terms of drying. So again, there's a commercial attraction there. So if we can marry in the waterless processing plus reducing and eliminating our drying costs, we all of a sudden make it even more attractive. Again, numbers. What does it essentially mean? It's just a comparison between aqueous dyeing and supercritical carbon dioxide dyeing. And essentially what it says is, normally you dye polyester at 120, and at that temperature you get the water-based dyes going on very efficiently. For supercritical carbon dioxide, it actually happens at much lower temperature, and we've got the attraction of being able to process at lower temperature with lower energy costs. One of the other features of polyester dyeing is putting in accelerants, dye accelerants. And one of those is this particular beauty, paravanillin, which obviously has a nice pleasant smell, but it also has the effect of accelerating the dye into the fibre and actually reducing the dyeing temperature down to 90 to 100. And also that has the attraction, particularly for natural dyes, you don't have to worry about the high temperature stability of the dye because we're able to do it at lower temperature. What's been done so far is looking at natural dyes that are soluble in supercritical carbon dioxide, imodin, luteolin, madder extract, alizarin. It works, you get good colour. What we need to do, and where we're looking, is extending that dye range so that we have a full colour spectrum for supercritical carbon dioxide dyeing, which will enable the industry to actually adopt the use of these materials. So, just to show you the effects, as I said, wool is not dyeable in supercritical carbon dioxide. What we have here is a 50-50 polyester wool blend. We dye it with imodin. You get that nice color there. The wool is undyed. What we've been able to do is to put a fiber modifier in to make the wool more like polyester and disperse dyeable. And as you can see, as we increase the amount of fiber modifier, we get a much deeper color. And the reason for that is, as well as the polyester dyeing, the wool is also dyeing too. So a technical success and a step forward. Again, bear in mind that I've talked about polyester, we talk about cotton. The two biggest blend materials is polyester wool, suits and trousers, and polyester cotton for general textile use. So these fibers, these blends, if you can target those and are able to dye both of the fibers with just one dye class, you're saving energy, you're saving time, it becomes a commercial proposition. And people like Paul will say, lovely science, marvelous technology, but how much is it going to cost me? I'm not interested in your beautiful stuff, your science. How much is that you start becoming much more convincing as to what you're doing. And this just shows the standard washing and the colour fade. And one of the things to take out is that we're getting dye loss from the washing of the poly wool blend, and the washing techniques that we're using are standards for the industry, but they're dyeing under a specific set of conditions which isn't helpful. Under alkaline conditions, if we scour and wash under neutral conditions, you can see that the colour bleed is much less, the dyes are more durable. Catenization of cotton. How can we improve the existing dyeing technology with natural dyes? And why we catenize cotton is that the cotton has a negative charge. The dyes traditionally are also negatively charged, so you get this electrostatic repulsion and the dyes don't exhaust efficiently. You have to put lots of salt in to encourage the exhaustion. By catenizing the cotton, you get the electrostatic attraction and you get the very efficient dyeing of the fibre with the natural dyes. And the chemistry that we've been looking at is a new chemical from Cotton Incorporated and Dow, which is called EcoFast Pure. It has no smell and it reacts very efficiently. And we've been the first university project that actually has been allowed to evaluate it. Simple treatment, pad dry cure, or pad batch wash off, and you get the modification to the fibre. Don't worry about the chemistry. The traditional application of cochineal to cotton uses tannic acid and alum, and the exhaustion level you get is about 62%, whereas when we use the catenized cotton, we get almost full exhaustion of the dye bath onto the fibre. So again, very attractive proposition. We're maximising our use, we're maximising the colour that we're transferring, and we're reducing any coloured effluent that's being produced. So commercial advantages. Wash fastness, not particularly good. But again, I highlight we're washing under alkaline conditions. Big question. The world is changing. We're not in isolation. When you wash your clothes, the detergent companies are changing how you clean your clothes. Traditionally, or in the past, it's been washing at 60 degrees C with a powder under alkaline conditions, relatively long wash cycles. That's no longer the case. Just to demonstrate, this is the natural dyed fabrics doing a washing process at pH 10, and you can see big color change. If we do that washing under neutral conditions, far less of a change to the color. Again, using standard powder detergents, alkaline conditions, big color change. This is a liquid detergent that's been developed. Usain Bolt, it must be good. Unilever product, Wonder Wash. And the key selling point is 15-minute wash cycle, 20 degrees C, pH 7. And very little color change, which is fantastic for natural dyes, because what we've done is we changed the test conditions, and we're able to get much better durability of the dye on the cotton. We, as I said, mentioned extending the color range, trying to be innovative, thinking about it. And this is a fabric here that we took a couple of tea bags and we extracted the color and put it onto the catenized cotton and got a nice, really strong brown color out of it. Very light fast, very wash fast, and also offers the potential for ultraviolet protection because cotton doesn't have that ultraviolet protection. There's no absorbers in there. Using this dye, we can use the natural dye for a higher functionality and higher performance. Recycling of polyester. Recycling is one of the real challenges. We know about landfill. We know about the impact it can have in Africa, where a lot of the second-hand clothing goes, and a lot of it goes straight to landfill. So how can we use supercritical carbon dioxide to actually address that particular problem? And what we've got here is a transfer printed polyester with all the different colors, and the same one here. This one's been treated with just clean supercritical carbon dioxide. That one's been treated with just water. And what you can see there is a complete homogenization of the color. Is that you have the opportunity to take multicolored designs, homogenize it, and then look to reuse that material. You cannot do that with an aqueous leveling process. It just doesn't have the right energetics. So this is where supercritical carbon dioxide offers potential. There are patents out there on this potential use. This is another example where we've madder dyed with alizarin polyester, and what we've put in is a white polyester that is being tied in knots, and we've transferred the dye from the first life polyester onto the second life product. So there's a potential for being very creative with very simple technology. Digital printing. Daniel, you're a genius, okay? Our job is to put the bullets in that creative gun for you. So what we're looking at is developing a range of natural dyes that can go into a digital printer and take the technical challenge out of it and more put the creativity into what the designers can do to develop the color range. And what we're able to do is look at cochineal, fustic, Saxon blue in producing a color palette and enabling the designer to actually produce product. Here, what we've got on the left is untreated cotton. This is the catonized cotton, and then we just give them a rinse. And as you can see, with the catonized cotton, when you digitally print on the cochineal, it's already wash fast and durable, which makes it very attractive to the processing. And that just shows, again, the color range that the color palette we're able to develop. Future work, we need to sell what is possible with the new laundering technology. We need to develop that materials platform for watercoloration. We need to recognize it's not king cotton anymore, it's king polyester. We need to develop dyes, natural dyes, specifically for that product and be able to enable the designers to do their magic, to design the products and sell them. We need to look at extracting these colorants from a much broader range of materials, and as well as that, recognize that natural dyes are technical materials and they have the potential for offering multifunctionality, whether it's antimicrobial, whether it's ultraviolet protection, whether it's solar absorption. So that's the future work, and that is the 21st century. Thank you. I apologize, I have run over, but I'm Welsh. And as you know, the Welsh can't stop talking. I have now, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. This was really really fascinating to hear, and we kind of also concluded that, or you concluded that there are possibilities to go forward and have solutions for problems or issues, challenges that we have. So now that we have heard each of your points of view, so could you just with one point conclude what is kind of the highlight and your offering for the future? What is the key from your perspective, if we look at the craft, the design industry, and the research point of view?
So I think it's very important, like I said, to be knowledgeable, to know about everything that was talked here today. And I must confess that during this project, I've learned so much new things, although having been a dyer for 20 years, that I didn't know it. And I think often you don't, if you don't go and try to find information, you don't see it. And we can see from the history that they were, when they used natural dyes, because there were no other dyes, they were very conscious of the quality of the dyes. Of course, the professional dyers were, but also the normal people who did their own dyeing, because I have found mentions when you go to buy indigo for your pot blue, how to recognize the quality of indigo, that it's if it's dull, it's not good. If it has this coppery sheen, it's good. So it's all about being educated and knowing these points.
What about Daniel?
Yeah, I have also several thoughts bombarding my brain. So, how to say? I was, of course, story is very important part of my work. Also, like as a communication, and definitely like natural dyes like this. How was the lep in English? Alder, yeah, alder tree. So, for example, I mean, everybody has associations and the childhood and making the whistles, and there is so much story around it, and yeah, it kind of opens up another way to share it, and yeah, I looked the storytelling part, but I was like definitely, I feel like. If I am behind the brand, I mean, my job is also to educate definitely the client or the audience, because we are very direct with communication using social media. We're using client letters, and we have like a big base actually. Like our emails, they reach every week like I don't know, 6,000, 7,000 people, which is a lot in Estonian scale. So definitely there is a responsibility, but of course, I mean, I have to find the balance, and I'm just like educating myself now. Right here, also like learning that digital printing is leaning towards the natural dyes. So I'm like questioning, what does it mean actually? Like how does it affect the price point, and how does it affect the whole like afterlife and the garments, like my responsibility. So yeah, I'm just curious.
Thanks. What about Paul?
I think I was asked yesterday in one of the meetings about whether we don't use natural dyes because they're too complicated to apply. I mentioned earlier we dye Nomex with benzyl alcohol. It's incredibly complicated. It's about 12 stages. You know, the reason why practical dyers haven't adopted natural dyes is not because it's complicated. We're very keen to adopt anything if the customer base demands it. But I also think it's very important that the customer base understands the limitations. Can they replicate the same shade? Do we have continuity of supply? You know, we're there to dye whatever. As a commission producer now, we will dye whatever the customer wants. So as long as there's a good enough message out there, that natural dyes are available, that this is what you can do with them, then we'd love to use them.
Thanks. What about Chris?
As I mentioned in my talk, the textile and dyeing industry is seen as a significant global polluter. The natural dyes and the new processing technology offers an opportunity for us to reposition the industry and that perception, so that rather than seeing it as being an offender, is that we're actually offering excellent stewardship for the environment, that we are doing things in a better way, that we're actually having a beneficial effect on the environment, rather than, for better or worse, it's seen that we're having a negative effect. So I think the challenge is there for the technologists to develop new ideas and processes. It's then for the designers to go, whoa, I can use that. We can do amazing things. But at the end of the day, in having these enhanced processes, we can actually then sell at a better price point. And then we come to Paul on the recycling is actually, and the cleaning up is, can we design products that are for their specific end use? Is the fast fashion garments tend to be of a much shorter lifetime, say 3 to 4 months, but we're using colorants that are absolutely have been designed to be bulletproof and are not able to be stripped out, are not able to be bleached. And the natural dye palette may give us that opportunity to say, it's only got to last 6 months. And if that's the case, then as long as it's durable in that 6 months, at the end of it, we can use innovative garment manufacture with dissolvable sewing threads, deconstruct it, decolorize it, and actually reuse the materials in innovative ways. I've been around a long time, and thank you, Lord. That could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But traditionally, textile departments and paper science departments were in one department, because paper is a non-woven made out of cellulose. It's allied. However, they separated because the paper industry became more mature and became its own entity. But that crossover between textile technology and paper technology offers real potential in terms of recycling and reuse. Is that when you're recycling cotton, in mechanically processing, the fibers getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually it gets to a point where you can't spin yarn, it'll be used in a non-woven, and then it gets shorter and shorter, and it moves into the paper processing area. And north of Leeds is a company that takes waste indigo dyed cotton yarn and converts it into a technical paper. And I think there's a lot of potential for cross-fertilization and mixing and matching different technologies. But with the indigo dyed paper, there's no attempt to take the color out because it's going to be expensive, and it actually adds to the nature of the product. But for natural dyes, if you're able to take the color out and then recycle and reuse the white fiber, there's lots of opportunities there. So fortunately, and there's still plenty of new opportunities, and it's exciting. And I think that's the key thing. Textiles and coloration is exciting.
Thanks, Chris. And I conclude from your talk, your one point, it's the complete recycling. Okay, so we got knowledge, story, understanding limitations, and then complete recycling, kind of these issues that are important. What do you think? You already talked a little bit about that what would be needed for the sustainable future then for textile coloration from your point of view. You are now already doing something, but is there something outside the box that would kind of be needed, that we really could go forward further?
Okay. I think in terms of any transition in the textile coloration industry, and I think me and Paul will both recognise the value of money, is that if your supercritical carbon dioxide is lovely, okay? Adidas, Nike have got their plants. It's for a specific product. But it's looking for that universal applicability. And even if you can demonstrate it, you're still going to have to invest money in new machinery. And the equipment that is out there is expensive. So this combined approach that we're taking is looking at the aqueous, can we improve the aqueous technology, the mordanting and all the parameters there is important. So you've got different pathways to get through to that final Valhalla and the new technology. I mean, one of the things that, again, the historical side, when I finished my PhD, I went to Australia, and my first coffee morning at the Research Institute, and I was being softened up, and a gentleman came up and sat next to me and said, if you think you've had a good idea about wool, I can guarantee that somebody else in this room has already had it, tried it out, found out it didn't work, and moved on to something better. And when you've just travelled all the way across the world, you've just got your PhD, the world is your oyster and you're crushed. But the point is you can learn an awful lot by looking backwards as to what's been done technically before. And there are answers there that are really insightful. And if you can incorporate that into your thinking and be aware of what's gone before and appreciate it, then I think you're in a much, much stronger position to actually identify the gaps in the market and understand how you can produce a better technology. And I say it's that what's current, what's in the future, but importantly, what's in the past. And I haven't had an original idea over my entire career, so the Australian was correct.
Any other ideas? Do you think that everything is invented already, or is there something to do? Chris said that it's good to look back. Tanel, you have used the folk costume and traditional for your creations. Have you created everything already, or is there room and ideas for new inventions?
I'm not talking as a scientist. I'm talking as an artist, and then I'm like very positive. I feel like, yeah, there are so, how to say, maybe again, like going back to the story might be unique. I mean, the details, if you focus on the details, they might be, I mean, there is always references and you can see so much, I mean, we are not Mowglis, so culture is always based on the previous, what's done before. But then again, you put them together in a new way. And definitely technology is also affecting it so much, like exactly like digital printing. It totally changed the stylistics and also the visuals of the fabrics or wallpapers, or I mean this kind of technological advancements or innovations. They totally changed the stylistical surroundings. So yeah, I would say so that I thought like this textile printing is a tool for me. So but I put my name there as a designer. So the people are looking at this as my product. And that makes me, sometimes I'm very anxious because I cannot be responsible for the textile because I am not weaving it, I am not printing it. I'm just putting it together in the end of the day, but actually I take the responsibility. So I feel very sensitive about all this durability and all these kind of issues that actually a client is going to face. So, and that makes me very cautious in a way towards all kinds of innovations. So that makes me a little bit like, how to say, not really jumping into because I feel responsibility in front of the client. So kind of trying to balance there. So I mean, yeah, this ideas has to be very proved and went through that I can put my name there.
Good. Liis, you have something?
Yes, it was an idea not about how to discover new environmental friendly dye process, but the simple thing of informing the consumer. So now when I go clothes shopping, the first thing that I look at is the tag that tells me what's the material. And if I want something in wool, I of course have to search for a day or so because there are not many wool items. But also this is such a simple thing, and it could also have information on dyes. And if we know that these which dyes are good for environment or are more permanent or are not permanent, if it's useful, then this is not something that we need laboratories for. It's just a matter of politics and making these kinds of decisions.
Good, yeah. And what idea came to my mind from Daniel's talked about the story and the details, and also connected to something that is something created already, and can we see something else in it with my colleagues Päivi Fernström and Anna Nuutinen. We have been examining this ugly that we look always on the right side of things, but how about when we look the back side, like when doing crafts, we try to create the most nice surface on the right side, but on the back side we leave the strings of the threads and knots and all ugly things, but we seldom look at the ugly side, and actually then kind of from the ugly side we can discover new things of the common thing that is not shown or appears from the right side, kind of to try to put on lenses that we can look the phenomenon from a different angle. Okay, but I wonder if we have had any questions from the audience or from online.
Is this on? Okay. We have one question online, but we'll check, see if there's any question in the audience first. No. Okay. So the one question that we got online was from Emily, And she has said, I loved hearing the range of perspectives here from traditional wise woman methods through the industrial chemistry. I am interested to hear if anyone on the industrial chemistry side, chemical side of the spectrum, how do dye processes affect the breakdown of polyester and other synthetics in the domestic wash cycle with the objective of reducing micro and nanoplastics in household wastewater?
Chris. So polyester is claimed, and a lot of this microplastic comes from polyester. So what would you?
I will follow along Rika's approach that there are two sides. There's the front side, which is always very positive, and there's the back side with the knots and the less positive side. The polyester is an excellent fibre. Technically, the reason it's the biggest fibre on the market is that it does the business. In terms of microfibre generation, I've talked about the change in the laundering practices. What's the future? It's going to be shorter cycles, lower temperature, lower agitation, lower pH. So it's going to be a much gentler process. So any microfibers that are produced will be on a lower scale. There's been a lot of work looking at the nature of the fabrics. The types of yarns, the whether you go with filament yarns that have no staple fibers so nothing can come out of it. The additives or the dyes that go into polyester, they're not going to change the fibrillation behavior because they're just dispersed within the polymer. They're not interacting with the polymer in a disruptive way. So that side is for polyester not significant. In looking forward with that positive approach, the change in the laundering processes will reduce the microfiber generation. Is that okay?
Yes, and I think that there is also research, and they have developed some kind of filters to filter microfibers from washing machines, like having them.
Yeah, I mean, you can the obvious thing is to put filters on the back of the washing machine to take out the short fibers and lint and collect them. It's an area that Paul and myself have applied for research funding to look, can we develop processing technology that will allow you to wash strength back into fabrics during industrial laundry. It could transfer through into domestic laundering, but also when you're doing it on the large scale, can you improve the integrity of the fabric so that you actually eliminate microfiber shedding? And Paul's doing his damnedest not to look excited, but it is an exciting prospect, and we're here to try and change the world, and it's these little steps. The technology's not hard, it's out there. It's just a case of getting the time to prove it. And we've done some preliminary work, and it looks really good. So there's light. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Great. So I was going to ask from Paul, is this working?
There's 2 points to that. The first point about the microfiber shedding is that there has been work done at Leeds University that proved that the vast majority of microfibers come out in the first 5 to 10 washes, which again adds to the point that if people are discarding textiles at that point, they're not getting the usage when there's less microfibers coming out. So it's the same old adage, is to love the linen, love the textiles longer and keep them. I mean, the other point is one of the barriers to recycling, certainly at linen, but it would be the same for fast fashion, is the fibre damaged when you get to that point? Is it worth saving? which is why I get very interested when Chris is offering me a solution, not only to fix the microfibers to the fibre, but also to wash strength in. If you can sit in front of a customer saying, not only am I going to send it back clean or a different colour, I'm going to send it back stronger. There is no barrier to recycling that. You've got to change perceptions of that, you know, things aren't used anything like as long as they should be. So I just need Chris to get the funding.
Great.
Yeah, I'm again not talking as a scientist, but I think also one point you asked, like what I picked up from the lectures, and I really, I don't know, it was totally like, how to say, very like consumer viewpoint, like exactly to these washing cycles, and that reminded me like these fights that I have at home with a partner. How often do we have to wash our clothes? And I really think that consumers are so much like habit based, and they do as it was done. But I think our lives has become so sterile in general that the clothes, you don't need to wash them so often. So people have this habit, like you have to always, when you wear, you put it in the washing cycle. And but we don't work anymore in factories. We're just in the sterile office. We go in the car, and then we end up in a sterile home. So I think this is also so much to work with the patterns of habits. So that will make a big change. You really like, I mean, yeah, we don't sweat so much, and all these things like which has changed in a human environmental, thing.
Yeah, I was going to come to the next point of this consumer aspects, that how to change and affect on consumers. You said that you add and you had made this questionnaire with the consumers, and do you inform with your products? Do you deliver information, for example, for washing
yes, we
instructions?
do. And it's very cautious because, I mean, again, it's a responsibility. So actually, like I will say to my friends, like, I mean, you can be much more easier, but for a client, I have to put, how to say, like the restrictions are very much more limited, just to be very safe and secure. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm really into this washing thing in general right now, because I feel like even like washing yourself, exactly, I have like with my partner, lots of like discussions on that. And yeah, that might make a big difference. But I mean, just saying out loud, like, please wash yourself less, it doesn't sound so good. It's not like promoting being dirty, but do you really need to shower every day? I think it's a really relevant question.
I'm sat next to him, he's fine.
You want something to be washed for in your factory?
I think most people know that I'm at the cutting edge of mobile phone technology, and this is the future. However, joking aside, what is coming over the horizon is that next generation of clothing apparel, which are wearable electronics. And that immediately starts you having to actually design it for laundering, for reuse, but also for recycling, because a lot of the materials that are in those wearable electronics need to be recovered. And when you listen to some of the people who are in the electronics field and looking to incorporate the circuitry, the sensors and whatever into clothing for either keeping you warm or whatever, monitoring your physiology, you cannot not have that bigger framework of how do you recover those materials and actually recycle. And again, the game is changing. It's like domestic laundering. The clothes we wear are going to change. They're going to become much more multifunctional. You'll be able to go out in the Estonian winter with a t-shirt and not feel the cold. Fabulous, because it's actually built-in heating. So I think textiles is a dynamic business. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly very interesting. And it draws from so many different areas. So I think we have to be prepared for the aesthetic design of wearable electronics, but then how do you get at those valuable materials, and how do you incorporate that type of foam technology into your clothing?
Please, did you have?
Not about heatable clothing, but it was really interesting in Tanel's presentation that your clients preferred the expensive silk instead of the polyester, or that's what they told you. But we can see that in the marketing that natural fibers, luxury fibers like cashmere and wool, which is nowadays I think already a luxury fiber, are really advertised on the textiles. You see sweater and there's this big sign saying with cashmere, and when you look at the label it's like 5% of cashmere, but and people say that they are not wealthy enough to buy sustainable clothing or naturally dyed clothing that's more expensive, but it's actually when I was selling yarn in fairs, my hand-dyed yarn and hand-spun yarn, what I learned very quickly is that people only look at the price tag. They don't think how much a kilo of this yarn costs. So it was easier to sell yarn if you made smaller skeins, although, and put a larger price for the kilo. So, and in Estonia we have in grocery shops you have to have the price for a kilo of the item. So it's been very good to make you realize what the things actually cost, and is it cheaper to buy cheap clothing and buy it every 6 months a new one, or should you invest in more quality?
Can I follow on with the cost? And one of the first battle lines between synthetic dyes and natural dyes was indigo. And you look at the history of the German dye stuff manufacturers promoting synthetic indigo versus the plantation indigo that was being produced in India, and the conversations that were going on, and a lot came down to the ease of manufacture and the lower cost of the indigo. That argument has gone on for many, many years, and people promoting natural indigo always recognize that the cost of cultivation and the cost of manufacturing is that much greater. One of the partners in this project is Pili, which is addressing that synthetic route and actually using enzymatic technology, bioengineering, to actually replace some of the steps in the manufacturing with greener chemistry. And what hopefully will ultimately happen is that in greening that synthetic indigo, is that it can be produced at a lower cost, and essentially then it makes it more attractive to use natural colorants. And I think that I'm not a bioengineer, I'm not into enzyme chemistry, but that's one of the powerful aspects of the industry, is that it's looking to innovate, and Pili are at the forefront of that. And one of the things we're looking to do in this project is combine the novel processing technology with the green indigo. Well, I know it's blue, but you know what I mean.
Okay, Tanel.
Yeah, and just quickly, one comment for your question about the client communication. So actually I would say the client is very eager to get to know all these aspects, and now they always say that you have to provide value in social media communicating with the client, and this exactly is how to take care of the things. And I see always this like also I have jewelry, silver is the most common one, and the videos and the posts about how to take care of, for example, jewelry, they're always hugely popular. So people are really eager actually to take care of this kind of precious design items.
Yes, very good. Unfortunately, our time is running.
We actually have a question online,
Okay,
and I have
yes.
a question if anybody else doesn't.
Yes, of course.
Tano, I wanted to ask you, your designs are fabulous. I want to get one in one of the green colors. But I wanted to ask you, how important is color in choosing or making the collection? Because one of the things that we discussed in the project is the availability, that there are very bright colors that are available, but then when you go with natural colors, they're not as bright as. Is that something that's important in your collection? Is that something that you think about? Is that drive a decision of an important collection?
I'm fully into the colors. It's just like, I think always colors are energy, and I mean, there is so much behind it. I mean, you feel it. It's a real thing. But then again, commercially, I mean, look at the audience or the street, or I mean, 99% people are wearing like different shades of black, more or less. So it is a kind of niche. Just, I mean, it's my addition to the world in a way, to kind of balancing this blackness, because I mean, there is so much designers who are providing it anyway. So it's all more like, I mean, I found my niche. But now thinking just like also like the information, like the inspiration that I got from here. I mean, you can exactly tell a story, or you can conceptualize also, like, let's say, like there is this alder, was that I mean, you can build the whole world around it. And I mean, there can be a collection which is really playing only with these shades, and it's already in the DNA of the collection that it's going to fade step by step while wearing. Or I mean, it's so much how I deliver the idea. So it can be anything in this sense if you can be convincing. And then, I mean, this is like somehow the DNA of the collection, and you really can build around very different ideas, and even like the wearing process can be also part of the already like the stylistical or like the surface of the collection in a way. So yeah, I see huge potentials in different sections. Just very often it is like, as it's mostly done in a computer screen, that gives a certain, it loses the sensibility of the textile in a way, and it becomes colors as a kind of, how to say, substance or unity by itself. So that's sometimes missing. So I have to go back to the textile to actually feel it again. And the color on the textile is different than color on the screen. So yeah, I mean, somehow being aware of this might help go back, which I do always during the process.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
The question online we have is from Isabella, and it kind of ties into the question that I just asked. If we start to introduce natural dyes via digital printing, how do we overcome public perception, especially in the UK, that natural dyes are always dull colors and fade badly?
I mean, I was almost answering it also. I think it is a little bit like, how to say it? It's a client's perception of a color. And I mean, you can shift it or you can play with it. And I mean, you can say, maybe in 20 years, we consider bright color to be a vulgar. If people are getting aware that it's very unsustainable, which I'm not saying, but I just play with the idea that actually we can plant the new ways to see things. So it can be also that it totally switches. Maybe really in 50 years we just only like whatever it is, like the lightest for the environment, and we source it and we appreciate it that way, and everything else becomes like a bad taste. It has happened with the fur, and I mean, we see these things really changing.
In terms of the fastness, that's something that you can address. And again, with the laundering, world changing, that should be okay. In terms of the color palette, one of the drivers for the transition from natural dyes to synthetics was that you had such bright colors in the synthetic range. it is what it is. Part of the reason that we're going to be looking at solvent extraction of dyes for supercritical carbon dioxide is that we're looking for new colorants, and hopefully, touch wood, they have that brightness and tinctorial strength that will change the perception. But we're at that stage of starting the journey.
And I could add to that we have already studied natural dyes in different fibers, and for example, some natural dyes like anthracenones on synthetic fibers, polyester and polylactic acid give really bright, like almost these fluorescence type of colorant. So it's not necessarily anymore the case that natural dyes create dull colors. And we are also measuring the colorants of our samples, and we are now producing a digital map and to try to more and more bring this kind of digital examples and prototypes of these colors and what they could be in textiles and creations.
And
We have a
anyone
final
who-
question in the audience, but please, sorry.
I just wanted to say that anyone who works with historic textiles and historic dyes only raises the eyebrows when it's mentioned that natural dyes are dull, but I do understand that this is the perception, and it's about, again, knowing how to dye well with natural dyes and which dyes which dye plants actually are true dye plants, which are not just plants that you dye with. You can dye with anything, but you get good dyes, good colors with a handful of them.
Okay, then we take the question from the audience.
Okay, so my first question is about your the different approaches of either having dyes that can be removed easily or dyes that can be made to be faster on the fabrics. So I'd love to know how the panel sees the two opposing technologies working in the market. And I also wondered whether Tanel had an opinion on that in terms of his own clientele. Would they be interested in having garments that could have the colours removed and then put back in different ways?
Shall I do the front end? Again, what we're into is market sectors, is that for fast fashion, where you're looking to, with a much shorter lifetime, and be able to reuse, remanufacture and recycle, if you're able to get at the fibrous material in a white colour, then the potential for then recolouring it, reprinting it, making new garments is attractive, and you're designing for that market. If you're designing for clothing that's going to last you until you're laid out in a coffin like mine, you want the dyes to last, and that comes down to the end product and the slow fashion where you're buying better quality materials. You're looking for the durability of the dyes there. So I think it's really looking at your market sector and targeting and designing the product for that end use.
Did I understand correctly that you mean like if it's possible to reprint? I cannot imagine it because it's always printed before and then it's sewn after, so you cannot deconstruct it back into this metrage of the fabric, how it's coming out of the printer. It would be like if it would be silk screen or just like an ornament, let's say, like in the middle of T-shirt, it would be easy to reprint it or something, put it over there, and it can be like conceptually, like even like thought in, like you can add like something and some elements becoming something else, and it's a beautiful. It can be another story, like taking it apart. But in that way, I cannot see it just because technically there is limitations. So yeah, it's age to age patterns, and the machine only cannot take the garment in. But with a silk screen, I can imagine. I have done, of course, silk screen, and there are all different types of during my studies, and also like the previous or the earlier collections. But it creates a definitely different result. So right now, feel like this digital printing is the one that allows me to tell my story that way. So yeah, I cannot see in this section, but it's a good thing to think about. I can trigger. Thank you.
I think I would say that is it 75 or 80% of a garment's carbon footprint is in its manufacture, and only 20% in its usage phase. So we either try and keep it longer in the usage phase, or find a way of sending it back to put more colour on time and time again. And I think we've discovered through this process that we're going to have to rethink what we do. I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was at a lecture at Leeds University saying that people don't want fast fashion, people want to keep things forever, people want to pay more. No, they don't. It's actually gone the other way. So we've got to somehow think of a different way of doing it. So if we construct a T-shirt's a T-shirt, why can't you take the colour off and just recolour it?
Yeah, one more comment, because I do jewelry as well, and I have had, especially I have the most sold product is a wooden earrings, and the color just comes off after like you have been very intensely wearing after some period. It's just like things start to burn out. And then I got quite a lot of requests, like, can you repaint it? But the thing is, repainting is more expensive than to give a new product. Because it's just like the process. I have like optimized the process so much. We do everything by hand. But even though the process, if I have to repaint one piece, like both sides, and there are already like the other details, it is just much more expensive. So we just like, it's easier for us to give another product. That's the reality in a way.
Okay, I think we are running out of time and we are at the final. I want to thank everybody for these very interesting discussions, and we could have continued till the evening. Till the evening, and thank you for following us, and please you can follow us in our social media channels and hear more about our research. So thank you, everybody.